we're going to go through step by step, and this is just going to be a quick high level overview, but we're going to talk about, some of the techniques, and then we can drill down a little bit deeper as we move along in your journey. So these are techniques that you can use if you have no money to put into the deal, right? So really what you're doing is you're replacing the need for money with the seller. So the seller is going to provide you the capability to buy that property in one form or another, right? And oftentimes the sellers, they don't know themselves how these things work. So this is an opportunity for you to learn, educate them, and then also potentially get a deal. So has anybody heard, what's that? Am I missing
Sorry.
anything? Okay. Has anybody heard the term subject to or know what that is? So I think there's a really big famous guy on TikTok. Is I think this Pierce Morby is this is like his specialty, right? Um,
Pace
Basically,
Morby.
Pace Morby, yeah. So basically, subject to is this like, and it's not going to work in every scenario. Subject to is basically when you go in and you talk to a seller, they have a mortgage on a property, and you take over that mortgage, right? So you're buying that property subject to the existing mortgage. So if there's $100,000 mortgage on the property and there's payments of, let's say $1,200 a month, all you're doing is you're going to take over that mortgage and take over those payments going forward, and you own the property. Now, there's a lot of things involved in how to get that done, but essentially, you're putting no money down in that case, right? So this is a big no money down strategy. It's basically taking over the mortgage of the seller. Now, this is not going to work if there's a ton of equity in the property, right? So you can't go to somebody who has a ton of equity and say that, hey, I want to buy a property subject to the existing mortgage, because all they would have to do is just sell it on the market and make more money, right? Instead of giving it to you for whatever the mortgage balance is. Typically, this will work with folks that are under foreclosure or facing foreclosure, or even some people that don't have equity in a property. So you might look at a deal and there's no equity in the property, right? And you can't do the burn method, you can't do anything else with it, you can't really buy it because it's underwater. Well, that could still be a deal if you take it subject to the existing mortgage, right? If the mortgage payment is low enough where you're making enough money from rent, even though today's value doesn't support what the mortgage is, you could still take over those payments, rent it out, make money, and then in the long run, you can end up having equity later on, right? Now, the seller will be open to doing that because once they may be facing foreclosure, they may get their credit screwed up, which means that they can't buy anything for the next 7 years or whatnot. They're not able to sell it because the house is the mortgage balance is over the value of what they can sell it for. So if they put it on the market, they can't sell it for what they owe. So they're kind of stuck in a bind. So you would come in and you would offer, hey, look, I'll buy this property from you. I'll take over your mortgage and I will save your credit, for instance, right? Um, so those are that's one technique that is used to buy without any money down. There may be instances where those seller will be like, hey, um, I want something for the property, and you have to take a look at the property and say, okay, is it worth it for me to just give the seller some money, right? You may want to give them 5, 10, to whatever you can come up with in order to obtain that property because it may be a property that's of significant value. So, like, let's say Junaid was talking about A, B, and C areas, right? So, if it's an A area property, the value of the house is 250, the mortgage is 275. You may want to just take over that mortgage, give the owner like maybe $5,000, and you have a property in an A area. You have no loan, you didn't apply for a loan, you don't have to have anything in your name in terms of a mortgage, and you're paying that mortgage and you're owning that property. Now, a couple things that you have to keep in mind. How do you own that property when you take over the mortgage? You have to get title into your name or your LLC or whatever entity you're doing, right? So how do you get title into your name? There's something called a quick claim deed, which when you set up your trust and all that stuff, you'll use this to move your properties into that trust or into that LLC. But in the same case, when you make an agreement with the seller, you do a quick claim deed to put that property in and title in your name. Now, this is where Jimmy's going to come involved, right? So you're going to have a contract, and we have a template for you to get that contract. You go to a seller, you say, "Hey, I'm going to buy this property subject to." You negotiate, you talk to them, they agree, you sign the contract, you send it over to Jimmy. Jimmy's going to take this to the title company, and the title company is going to work on getting that title transferred into your name, right? So the title gets transferred into your name, but the mortgage remains in the seller's name. Okay. There's no mortgage in your name. The mortgage remains in the seller's name. All you're going to do is you start making payments on behalf of the seller to that mortgage, because that mortgage is still a lien on the property. So they can still foreclose if you don't pay. So instead of the seller paying, now you're becoming the one that pays that mortgage. Even though that mortgage is not in your name, that mortgage is still a lien on the property. So you do have to pay that mortgage until that's paid off. But the cool thing here is title is in your name. So you own the property, there's a mortgage on the property, that mortgage is not in your name. So your credit is not affected in any way. Okay. So I know I threw a lot at you on that. Any questions on subject two? And we can go in much more detail on this, but this is one technique of how owner financing works.
So from a seller perspective, out, I mean, surface level, why would it be beneficial for me to then trust someone to pay payments on a mortgage that's under my name? Like, wouldn't I
Yeah,
be weary of that?
good question. Yeah, you would be aware of that. And you as an investor have to explain to them, like, look, I know you don't know me, but I'm in the interest of acquiring property and owning property. So I want to buy this property and I want to keep it for myself, right? The only other option they have, and like I said, this is only going to work if they're under risk of foreclosure, right? So the only other option they have is to let the property go and mess up their
Mm.
credit, right? So what you're doing is you have to present it in a way that you're saving their credit, right?
Oh.
They can start their life fresh. Yes, the mortgage is going to remain in your name. However, you're not able to pay it. I'm going to pay it for you. And why would I pay it? Because I want to own this property, right? If I don't pay it, I'm going to lose the property, right? And I'm in the business as an investor to own property. So
Mm.
it is something that you have to sell them, right? Because any normal person, especially in this day and age, they're going to be like, dude, this is a scam, right? But you have to kind of present that to them. And that's where we have a section on talking to sellers. And I have a couple of recordings of kind of mock conversations with different people that I did. And I'll share that with you guys. But you'll see like what kind of questions you ask, how you want to progress through that, and how you get to the point where you make this offer, right?
So when
Go
you
ahead.
take over this, so when you take over this property's payments, you're essentially tied to them until you've pay out that mortgage? Or is there a way to kind of
Well,
refinance out, or like how does that, you know?
yeah, yeah. So there's a lot of things you can do. Number one, until the value comes back to something where you can refinance, you can't really refinance, right?
Okay.
So you have to wait till the value comes back. The reason they're maybe in foreclosure is because number one, they can't pay it, they can't pay the mortgage, and they can't sell it on the market because the value isn't there. Otherwise,
Hmm.
they would just put it on the market and they would just sell it, right?
Yeah.
That would be the smart thing to do because they'll get their money back. But in this case, like they're not able to sell it because it's they owe more than what it's worth, right? So in that case, like what was your question again? I'm sorry.
So you'd basically be tied to them,
You won't be tied
like,
to them. You won't be tied to them. You'll be tied to the lien on the property. So the mortgage remains in their name. So like the mortgage is on their head for the rest of their life, like from a
hmm.
credit point of view, right? But from a property point of view, you're only tied to that note, that mortgage that's on the property. So just pretend like that's a mortgage on your property. So if you
Mm.
stop paying, the bank is going to take over the property, right?
Okay.
It doesn't
Yeah.
matter who the name the mortgage is in, right?
Hmm.
So the key thing here is the title is in your name, which gives you ownership. So you're going to own the property. You don't have a mortgage, but there is a mortgage tied to the property. So you may never have to talk to the owner again, right?
Mm.
But that mortgage will still be there,
Yeah.
right? Now, there is one caveat here, like when you do that, so when these mortgage companies write these mortgages, they make it so that they have every opportunity to foreclose on you. When you do something like that, there's a due on sale clause. So when you transfer title like that, when Jimmy and the title company put that property in your name, technically that's considered a sale, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if the bank knows about that, they can say, okay, well, you sold the property, you owe me the balance, right? Now, that's highly unlikely as long as they receive the payments,
Mm-hmm.
right? And out of all my contacts and myself and everything, nobody's really experienced that issue, right?
Yeah,
So number one, you never want to inform the bank that this is happening, right? This goes
sure.
behind the scenes and it's all legal because it's done through Jimmy, it's done through the title company. It's just a transfer of title. And then you just continue to pay the mortgage. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
So some of the advantages, we'll go real quick. So you don't have to apply for a loan. So let's say, for example, your credit is bad. This is a way for you to purchase a property without applying for a loan. You buy the house with little or no money down. Um, if the property is in decent condition, you can rent it out and make money. You don't impact your credit, and the property is under your name, so you own a property, right? Disadvantages, it's likely that you won't have that much equity in the deal, which is okay because you're keeping it for the long run, but you're making cash flow, right? If you're not making cash flow, you really want to think about whether or not you want to do it. If it's something that you can sustain for a period of time and the value of the house will go up, you might choose to just pay out of pocket for a little bit, right? That's a risk reward thing that you have to kind of decide for yourself. Um, you may have low equity and low cash flow. This is just a numbers game again. You got to make sure that your numbers work, and you might have to do some fixing up because when somebody's in that situation, they stop maintaining the house. There is some repairs, so you might have to come out of pocket for a couple things. But again, it may be worth it because you're getting a property with no money down, right?